Dear friends from around the world, good morning, good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our very first program of this channel called JJMB Congo Afrique Monde, or as English people would say, JJMB Congo Africa World. This is a channel where we'll be sharing with you our thoughts on matters affecting Africa, particularly the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we come from, and why not from time to time the world, since it has become a single small village because notably of the extraordinary evolution in technology for the past decades. What is happening in any part of our planet, be it in Mali, Burkina Faso, DRC, Nigeria, Morocco, Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Botswana, Swaziland, Iceland or China, to name just a few countries of the village, will affect all of us in one way or the other. And the example, the war, the cases of the war between Russia and Ukraine, or the killings in the eastern part of the DRC by the terrorist group M23, backed by Rwanda as per UN investigation report, are a good example of that. Today we are going to speak about His Excellency Felix Tshisekedi, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and see how he is succeeding in giving in so little time a new breath of life to this great African country which was in the coma. We'll be talking about all this in a few moments. Please stay tuned. How did President Felix Tshisekedi manage to achieve so many feats in such a short time, 2 years to be more precise and honest with ourselves, because the first 2 years out of the 4 consumed were spent seeking to free himself from the grip of the regime of his predecessor, with whom he was obliged to coalesce for having also had a grip on parliament and tentacles everywhere in the state system, in particular the army, the administration, the economy, and so on. From there, how did he manage to stand out and build where his predecessor, who had accumulated a trifle in power of more than 54 years, had barely managed to scratch the skin or the scales of the crocodile development. This has earned him accolades in his country and around the world, although his political critics think otherwise, but that's politics. But from the bottom of their hearts, they are as dazzled as we all are. What is it that the others didn't have? In short, our opinion is that this president is just that rare breed of people that every country begs to have as a president. People who come to power with a big heart for their people, and also everyone with a lot of intrinsic values, and impressed by the accumulation of personal possessions, fearing God and putting in a lot of work to solve the problems of the people. Among them, to name just a few that comes to mind, we found President Mbeki of South Africa and President Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso. There are certainly quite a few good handful of others. This is more or less a summary of the principles that have and continue to help this president, and to these we must add something, and not the least, which is that they are calm in the face of political distraction and adversities, no doubt, because when one follows the principles of good and truth, nothing else can shake you. We are going to try to discover together what this president has done in such a short time and pick here and there some notorious achievements, because the list, you doubt it, is very long for the little time we have ahead of us. We could always talk a little more about the other achievement in our next issues as soon as the opportunity arises. Please stay tuned as we take a little break with this beautiful piano music by Akka Gandhi, and we take a look at this beautiful picture of Germany, a country dear to President Tshisekedi, who promised to make of the DRC the Germany in Africa. Felix Antoine Tshisekedi is the son of the DRC first Justice Minister and then Prime Minister Etienne Tshisekedi. first close to Mobutu, then one of the main opponents of the regimes of Mobutu, then of the Kabila father and son. Born on June 13, 1963 in Leopoldville, today Kinshasa, Felix Tshisekedi is the third child of 5 in the Tshisekedi family. He completed his secondary studies in Kinshasa and higher education in Belgium. In the early 1980s, Etienne Tshisekedi was exiled by Mobutu to Kasai with his family, then left for Belgium. Felix Tshisekedi is marked by the exiles. He joined the ranks of the Union for Democracy and Social Progress, UDPS, a party led by his father, then became one of its executives. At the end of 2008, he was appointed the National Secretary of UDPS, in charge of foreign affairs. In November 2011, he was elected deputy. He refused to sit, thus following the instructions of the party leader, and he was stripped of his mandate as of June 18, 2013. In October 2016, he was appointed Deputy Secretary General of the UDPS. At the end of March 2018, Felix Tshisekedi was elected President of the UDPS. He is also nominated as a candidate to represent the party in the presidential election scheduled for December 2018. On December 30, 2018, he was elected the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo. If the results were to be validated by the Constitution Court, Felix Tshisekedi would become the new President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, succeeding Joseph Kabila and thus operating the first democratic transition of the largest country in Central Africa. Although controversial, it is the first peaceful political change since the country's independence. Tshisekedi chairs the African Union from February 2021 to February 2022. Let's open here a parenthesis on the controversy of this election because it is important, and know from the outset that it is nothing but politics, if you allow the term. Because firstly, protests in Africa is only the norm for losing candidates to position themselves politically and financially, not to be buried. And secondly, for this case, how do you expect the same foreign interests owning the biggest European media with global reach, who had financed the weak candidate Fayulu, who had no base in the country, and who, frustrated by their own failure, are not the same to convey on a large scale the lies that we have heard and continue to hear against a clear victory for President Tshisekedi, which was also the victory over the abuses of the media that are believed invincible and everything permitted. The rest was just the famous story of the thief who shouted, "More thief." I had personally asked the Financial Times to release the alleged leaked documents the magazine claimed to have, and then tell me how they got them. None of this was done. They had to be taken on their word. What I got, however, was to see access to my account with the magazine blocked. However, this document obtained in this way could also have been a trap set for them, because remember that the Electoral Independent Commission had gone through these experiences of intrusion well before and prepared well accordingly. The media have enormous and excessive power if they must misuse it to manipulate opinion in the direction of their interests and sponsors. We are well doomed. Yet that is what they do most of the time. Fortunately, there was social media as a counterweight. Fortunately, there was President Trump who, despite everything that can be said about him, had indirectly awakened the Congolese to identify the trickery that this media had set up to destroy the candidate Tshisekedi, a Trump who, with his famous fake news campaign, had given us a word that summed it all and was so beneficial as well that it came at an opportune time. I remember throwing myself body and soul against this trickery of the media, particularly certain media in France, which more than anyone else had chosen to play with this country, the largest French-speaking country in the world, much more than France itself. During the election campaign, this media had the nerve to introduce us to the candidate Fayulu as tycoon in the oil and hotel industry, as they called him. Yes, tycoon was the word used when he was only ex-employee of an oil company and owned no decent hotel by industry standards, much less an hotel chain like that tycoon name dishonestly suggested to viewers. What he owned was $40,000 debt to a well-known local lady, and what some people would call a small bread and breakfast utility somewhere in the city of Kinshasa. As for the candidate Felix Tshisekedi, who was presented to us as inexperienced chap, knowing well that the man was at the head of the largest political party in the country and adored by most Congolese. But give time to time, the future will always show you the true reality, and that is the reason for our topic today. It is in the same way that it will demonstrate today what was in the heart of some leaders of the Catholic Church who had chosen to ally themselves with the candidate losing the 2018 election, and summarized today by the firm declaration of Pope on a visit to the Congo asking priests to leave political life and materialism. Pope John Paul II had already done it well when he reprimanded the priest in a view of multitude of faithful members who had come to welcome him in Latin America. At the beginning of this campaign, I would ask all of you to pay attention to the foreign media and the sound boxes and relays in the country, particularly French and Belgians. The war against this president and the Congolese people had already started well again with the famous rhetoric of stolen election, which they think could perhaps influence some drinkers in the upcoming elections, and also taking advantage of the war in the east, where the countries are pushing the grip on the Congo, setting fire to a conflict that has already seen 10 million Congolese dead, as long as they show how falsely so-called weak this government is and fall for the interest to be served. So major foreign media earn a lot of money behind their sponsors for not to see an Africa and a Congo at peace, with statements, if I notice, have always been the same regardless of the government in place. Otherwise, how would they survive? But this time they will still bite the dust for a second time. Even Kagame, yes, him again, who has no lesson in democracy to give anyone, has recently taken the liberty of speaking of Tshisekedi's victory in a bad way. This is to give you an idea of the machine that had organized itself to influence the 2018 elections in the DRC. Tshisekedi was going to, if he won, they thought, upset all the calculations of the stabilization of the DRC to continue to suck its minerals and take its land. This victory over the foreign media and their sponsors was the great victory of the Congolese and African people who no longer intended to be abused and manipulated in all directions. We once asked an African journalist who spoke lightly of the war in the Eastern Congo to take a good look at this 14-year-old girl with both her hands cut with a sharp tool, but who, despite a horrible experience, seemed to have recovered mentally, seemed happy when she smiled to the cameras, and asked her to wonder if she hadn't gone through yet another such experience after all these days that have passed, and if she was still alive while thousands of miles away in an air-conditioned office, her African sister was playing with words, and we suggested that she instead resign for what the company was making her do and say. There are like that millions of children who have perished or have been deformed by the abuses committed by Kagame in Eastern Congo, and the part of the foreign media with inflammatory remarks is not to be neglected in this affair. I wouldn't like here to give the impression that I have a problem with French, Belgians or Westerners in general, or the Fayulu men and other politicians with the same attitude. The problem I have is with all those who make life difficult for these long-scared Congolese people because they do not allow them to concentrate on the development, to understand and seize the slightest chance they might have to look to the future with a small ray of hope as it is today, and to begin a process of recovery, to work and progress from this moment. There comes a time in the life of a people when all its members ignore distraction, all come together as one, get to work and push together to get out of the deep hole where they've been thrown for decades for a better future. I don't have a problem with Westerners because I have great memories of my visit to Belgium from the 3rd to 5th primary years, a very long time ago, and I remember having received extraordinary affection from my classmates and teachers, neighbors, strangers, and neighborhood friends, at a time when blacks like me in my commune could not be found anywhere, and learned that the vast majority of Westerners in my time had big hearts. Today, I do not know where this proportion is. It is also a fact that our brothers have also had behaviors that have changed this proportion either. But I also had the 3rd grade teacher, the first one I had there, who never missed an opportunity when it came up to put down a student and say he wasn't a little black kid monkey from the Congo when he did something wrong to frustrate me. Here are the people with whom I have big problem. There's people who can push the uninformed to seek an image that their fellow citizens do not all have. I have a problem with some members of the elite of these countries and others of their fellow citizens who continue to believe, as in colonial times, that the well-being of the countries and the population lies in the weakening of other people to suck their resources to the population. Would say that we should no longer accept to eat these type of bread, because for the forces of the universe that govern us, that many call God, or the source, 100 years spent on each for a human are only one moment in the dimensions of the universe, but played for you in a slow motion to allow you to pull yourself together for a moment of grace. But look at all that we have done in an instant. Time, which is for the universe to very quickly sort out in less than a second the good from the bad, and do the goods towards a higher life or dimension. In an instant, I said, we would have lied millions of times, killed our fellow human beings and other beings, stolen, caused misery around us, destroyed nature, had lots of bad thoughts, and so on. All that in an instant that seemed like 100 years to us, yet this moment has already passed, and you are only watching the film of your past play for you in slow motion at this moment of your final judgment. Have you ever had that feeling of déjà vu and see what came next? On good terms, hello. This is also for you the big media which causes so much suffering with your manipulations, and because of the financial interests of a moment. To return to some of our politicians who took the Congolese people hostage in a game played since 1960, and which did not bring them anything until some 4 years ago, where now all hopes are ahead of them. I have no problem with them as individuals and fallible beings, but rather with some of them as negative elements in the system, because making the Congolese people lose a unique opportunity to stand out from the tumultuous past since 1960, to come together and face a common enemy who has always wanted to see us weak and divert us from progress by opening up breaches to them, despite the president's outstretched hand, a situation that slows us down in our speed. Your decisions are yours, but know the consequences affect us all. Let's close this discussion and now talk about the amazing achievements that makes this president an exceptional man, a man who had an appointment with the good side of Congolese history. It is true that to do justice to this subject will need a second issue or more, and that we promise to do in the next few days. In his first actions, barely coming to power, President Tshisekedi will declare free education for primary education, a right recognized by the constitution of the country and enshrined in the UN Charter for Human Rights, but a program that seemed very ambitious and excessively expensive. How was he going to do without much left in the state coffers by previous regime? What had fallen on his head will all his usual critics, and in addition, it must be said, he had just faced and had eradicated the Ebola disease by taking a series of perfect decisions and actions that were going to save the country and the world from this terrible scourge which was shaking the world and which was spreading fast and without the means to defend ourselves. By ousting his Minister of Health, deemed incompetent at the time, as the following things would show so well when he replaced him in charge of Ebola program and chose my namesake, the eminent virologist Dr. Jean-Jacques Muyembe, to lead the national campaign against Ebola disease. For those who don't know, Dr. Muyembe is the one who discovered Ebola in 1976 and its treatment, and whose credit was dishonestly attributed to Belgian researchers. But today, the truth has nevertheless been restored, and Dr. Muyembe has consequently received several international awards for his discoveries, including the Royal African Society Prize and the Japanese Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize. This eradication of the disease is still something to be credited to President Tshisekedi, but that his opponents quickly forget in the drawers of the past, no doubt, because a victory of this magnitude and clear in front of a whole world trembling with fear, but dazzled at the end, would not be good to mention and remember if they still wanted to have a small political chance in the future. Perhaps the world and the Congolese also too quickly forgot the psychosis in which they found themselves not so long ago, and to often thank this president and his doctor. Let's move on. So we were saying, how was President Tshisekedi going to deal with the free education? Let's follow. Barely came to power, President Tshisekedi declares free education for primary education, which will see 5 million students to go to school throughout the national territory. That was the first sign of a grand vision from afar, because when a president does not give a place of pride to education of the youth to ensure the future of the country, it will mean that it does not have a vision from afar and a strategic one. President Tshisekedi not only takes care of primary school students, but he continues to improve the teaching infrastructure of the whole cycle up to university, the construction of new buildings, and the creation of new universities. A program like this required a lot of resources that the Congo would have had difficulty raising from the budget that the new government had inherited from decades of mismanagement from its predecessor. For a large country like Congo with 100 million people and an annual budget of just $4 billion, starting a program that required at least a quarter of that budget was a headache. But look, in just 2 years, he was going to do the impossible by multiplying this budget by almost 4 times, and the foreign exchange reserve by the same fold. Impressive, isn't it? Because of this performance, its Minister of Finance is awarded for 2 consecutive years as the best Minister of Finance in Africa, and is also awarded the prize by Forbes. It does not stop there. Despite the successive effects of the COVID-19 epidemic and the war in Ukraine with Russia, which will negatively affect all the economies of the world and make them watch for recession every day, the economy of the DRC has remained more than resilient by posting growth rates among the top highest in the world, and will post 6.7% or more or less 7% in 2023, according to IMF forecasts of the third highest rate in Africa, for a world average rate which is currently around 3%. Again, impressive, isn't it? Especially since the Congo had to deal with the Ebola disease in the east of the Congo, as we said it, and is still facing conflict with its neighbors in the east for more than 20 years now. A war whose theft of minerals have inflated the figures attributed to Rwanda and its sponsors, and which otherwise would have made the DRC one of the most efficient economy in the world at this time. This is how the DRC free education program. We see 5 to 6 million children who might have been left behind aid to school, with the teachers and administration supported by the government. As usual, several critics were going to stand up. It will not work because it was necessary to start by preparing the infrastructure to avoid, for example, having too many students in the classes, some said, and others said that there were not enough financial means for that, and that the quality of teaching would suffer, many more blah 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 of the sort. Please join us in our next broadcast to find out how the government reacted and to know our analysis on this subject, and also have the continuity of the achievement of President Tshisekedi of the DRC. We have come to the end of this first issue of a series of programs on the prowess of President Tshisekedi. Thank you for having been with us, and we look forward to seeing many of you connected again. See you soon, and many good things at home.